What was the most fucked up thing you saw at your school? Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy. Thanks. Story 1. Not saw, but I did experience the aftermath. A kid at our school died once, while out on a school camp. They were way out in the Australian outback. The teachers made barbecue for the kids, and one of the boys, for some reason, ate the food kebabs without asking what was in them, even though his parents had filled out his permission, a form indicating clearly that he had food allergies. Long story short, hardcore anaphylaxis. Throat swelled shut, fell to the ground, foaming. School nurse stabbed him with every single EpiPen they had in the medical kit. Nothing. Nada. Zip. Fuck all happened. Picked him up, threw him in the van, and sped out of the campsite at top speed down the road. They were so far out in the middle of nowhere that there's no phone reception. Can't do anything. Can't call for an ambulance, helicopter, nothing. Finally got to the nearest town, called emergency services. Helicopter arrived, loaded the kid onto it, started treatment, flew straight back to town. Never made it. Dead before the chopper landed. I was working at the school at the time. I had a job offered by the school to graduates, which I accepted, and found out all the details from the school nurse. There was blood everywhere, mostly on the kid. He was punching, he was kicking, he was slamming his head against a bench. He bit part of his ear off. No lying, he almost killed him. Broke several ribs, several fingers, his ankle, jaw. Apparently he had a ton of mental health issues, and deliberately stopped taking his meds just so he was unhinged enough to do that to the bully. People talked about it for years after it happened. A buddy of mine became a teacher there. It still apparently gets mentioned. It's like a folktale, over 18 years later. Story 4. Some kids were punching a mason jar lid that we used to seal a jar with some bug in it. They were doing it as some sort of who's tougher test. When the teacher sees this and sees they have small scratches on their knuckles, she proceeds to tell them that the bag was poisonous and they will die very soon since they drew blood punching the lid. We were maybe 10 at the time. She made them write goodbye notes to their parents and make goodbye speeches to class. We were all tripping because we believed her too. It was wild. This child was mixed race, and this was in the 80s and in apartheid South Africa. Those who refused got hit with a cane for not listening to their teacher. Supremely messed up, and I will never forget it. She was fired a year or two later for various messed up things. Story 7. A new kid at our school grabbed the art teacher's scissors and threw them over a dividing wall when the teacher left the room. They hit some girl in a different art class on the other side, and one of the blades went through her cheek. We were held after class until he finally confessed, and we saw the police at the school later. He had been at our school for about a week, and we never saw him again after that day. Pretty popular guy comes running through the crowd, chased by a group of 3 other dudes. A little bit of space opens up for them to run through, but all of a sudden one of the chasers stops, pulls out a gun, and fires 3 right into his back. Murdered, right in front of a significant chunk of students. Very sad day. He would sit at the front of the class in his mesh shorts and no boxers and teach us about sex education. His dick would sometimes be visible. We had a class of 40 boys and 6 girls, and apparently us girls were pretty naive cause we all brushed it off as an repetitive accident. In hindsight, as an adult, that asshole was showing his penis to teenagers on purpose, and we were all too dumb and scared to realize. He was real handsy in gym too. It's not the worst story, but still super gross. Story 11. At an assembly in the auditorium there was some kind of raffle. The kid who won was gay, maybe one out of the 5 or so openly gay kids in my school of 500 plus students. All of those kids were bullied and made fun of for being gay. Anyway, when they called his name and he came up on stage, it seemed like practically the entire auditorium was booing him. He went up, grabbed whatever it was he won, and flipped the middle finger to everybody in the room. He got suspended for that. This would have been around August 9th. Story 13. Some dude threw a chair in the head of another student, then beat the living shit out of him. Also, some guy got a concussion because someone threw a kiwi fruit and he got hit in the head. Story 14. Some guy in college sat in front of me in a studio. We were on stools, so there was no back to the chair. He had his phone in his back pocket, screen facing out with rough porn playing on his phone. He had his headphones on. I wasn't the only one who noticed, but I certainly didn't want to break the silence by telling him. Story 16. In 1981 I was in grade 4 and we had a sadistic teacher. She'd beat us for any reason. The worst I saw were 2 incidents. The first was when she caned a boy on his palm. She thrashed his hand until the skin broke and blood gushed out, The second was when she called a boy up to the blackboard to solve a maths problems. Poor boy was so terrified he froze. She grabbed him by the neck and smashed his head against the blackboard several times. She regularly did this to him, and eventually he ended up in hospital with a serious concussion. She taught there for many years and no one ever did anything about her. This was in South Africa, and back then teachers were considered untouchable by most parents. If you came home complaining that a teacher hit you, you'd probably get another thrashing because the teacher was always right. She's dead by now and I hope she's burning in the deepest reaches of hell. Someone else tried to suicide by jumping. Another kid was beating everyone and had anger problems. Turned out his parents beat him at home and calmed him down by force-feeding him alcohol beverages. Fucking hell. Some real redneck pride kinda stuff. There were 2 freshmen, total boners, but they were tough shit apparently. I remember it was the day before homecoming. They lured one of the special education kids into the boys' restroom and barricaded the door. They proceeded to beat the ever-living shit out of this kid and take pictures of each other, forcing a barely conscious far-spectrum autistic kid to fell at them. This part one didn't see, of course. What I did witness was after school. I got benched in football for smoking weed, so coach made me help coach freshmen so I wouldn't feel left out or useless. The freshmen practiced on a different field that got a great view of the parking lot. The victim had already been taken away and the 2 other kids were being questioned at the school. This was probably an hour after school let out. An officer came out with an of the attackers and was walking him across the pavilion. From the other side, another person, huge dude, got out of their car and started walking towards the officer and then one attacker. When they finally crossed paths, the huge guy gets one hit at the kid, knocking him down immediately, then dropped another first while the kid was flat against the concrete. Turned out the big guy was the autistic kid's dad, and nobody ever saw the one attacker again. There were a couple rumors spreading. Some said the kid was killed by the second punch, and other people were saying that impact scrambled his brains. The other attacker, I couldn't tell you. Nobody cared enough about him to start any rumors or spread any news. Story 20. The ambulance in front of the school because 2 guys glued their eyelids shut with a quick dry adhesive. Story 21. I had a psych professor who just disappeared in the middle of the semester. We came to class and someone new walked in and said they were asked to sub for us that day, but they had no idea why. Ended up subbing the rest of the semester. Turns out some students who followed his Instagram saw that he had finally proposed to his girlfriend of like 10 years and they presumably just up and left together. He was always telling us about how he'd been wanting to do it but didn't have the guts to. So kind of weird, but I guess it turned out okay for everyone and we were all just proud of him. Story 23. Once saw a teacher fully dump out a teenage girl's bag because he was convinced she stole one of his pens, exposing her pads, tampons, phone, hairbrush, etc., also her diary, which some random kid picked up and started reading out loud while laughing, exposing her life at home where her mom and dad are mentally abusive towards her. All the kids made fun of her, and the teacher was just screaming her about a freaking pen. She ran out, and about 20 minutes later the teacher found the pen under his papers. She transferred schools. Story 24. A couple of 9th graders last class in middle school were saving up their semen for a couple of weeks. They then proceeded to change the soap dispenser for their own bottle in the bathroom. Story 25. Primary school. Boys' bathroom. Poop. Poop everywhere. Floor, toilets, urinals, sinks, walls, mirrors, doors, air blowers, ceilings, lights, and trash can. It looked like a group effort. So much poop. Story 26. The EMTs wheeling out the Spanish teacher after she had died in the girls' bathroom of a heart attack. Story 27. When I was in college, there was a bomb scare. FBI was called on campus and everything. I still had a chemistry lab get to, even though the building in which the class was located was A directly next to a building which had been evacuated, and B firmly behind the yellow police tape. There was a stream of students passing this police tape and entering a back door held open by AITA to this building for classes. I joined the line and went to class. To this day I cannot fathom what I or anyone else was thinking in that moment. Story 29. There was a kid I knew, IDK how or why, or if it was his dad's or grandpa, but the fucker brought a grenade to school to show me. It was when we were leaving school. Guy just opens his backpack and lets me take a look, and sure enough it was there. Story 30. We had a shooting because a kid was bullied so bad by popular football players. About a week after going back to school, the same bullies were right back at it, Admin did nothing to stop them and did nothing to address why the shooting happened. Story 31. There was a car accident in front of my school. 3 kids in the class below me got hit at 95 miles and the woman who hit them survived. 1 student died on impact, another died when they got to the hospital. The third survived but was in a coma for the rest of the year. When he woke up, he asked where they both were. Doctors had to lie to him about their whereabouts until his body was strong enough and the bleeding in his brain stopped. The woman got no jail time and the whole town went crazy. 2 weeks before that, my best friend was shot in the face and died. We had constant therapists at the school and the road was closed until they could finally wash away all the blood. It's been for years and a lot of us still can't go where the crash happened without breaking down. That road, before it becomes a school zone, it's 35 miles per hour. It got to the point where it was called Blowjob Corner. Almost 30 years later, my son goes to that school. I made a joke to him about staying away from the seaside stairs near the cafeteria, and he said, "You mean Blowjob Corner?" They put cameras in because of that. Cut to me with surprised Pikachu face. He would come up the middle aisle in between all of the buildings where everyone hung out before first period, in his Senna shirt, hat, and chain while singing the theme song, and he would actively challenge people to fights by punching them in the face. He was a small kid, and we all knew he was special, so we just let it happen without incident. There were several race and gang fights that would amount to 30+ people just destroying each other. Not gonna dox myself, but there are videos on YouTube for proof. During one of the race fights, I watched a very large Samoan dude lay out several fully grown adults while they tried to break up the fight, including the SRO and vice principal. We were told on several occasions that the reason why we had to carry 40+ pounds of textbooks up and down a bill every day was because they didn't trust us to have lockers due to weapons. My weight training teacher knocked out a kid while using brass knuckles, which he teacher openly admitted to carrying on him every day. There were multiple occasions where all of the teachers would get replaced by substitute teachers, undercover cops, whenever we would have a suspected school shooting, bombing threat. Perhaps the least surprising out of all of that, my parents pulled me out during sophomore year because I was dealing drugs, ditching, and getting into fights. I'm doing pretty well now as an adult. High school was pretty fucked though. Story 35. Apparently y'all went to school in some sort of Lord of the Flies LARP. Story 36. I was in 8th grade art class and part of the curriculum was to develop film in the darkroom. Our teacher would send us into the darkroom in sets of 3 to 4 to develop, and once he had shown us how to do it, he wouldn't really come in. My group of 3 included my buddy and one of the hot chicks in my grade. She gave him a blow job with her tits out while I watched under the red lights. First real tits I saw, plus my buddy nutting and her taking it like a champ. Weird, hot, awkward, nasty. Still don't know how to feel. Story 38. I attended a boarding school in Nigeria where the older boys bullied the younger boys on a nightly basis. They would come and take one boy, strap him to a pole like a deer, and carry him down to their dorm. The boys were more terrified of being taken than they were of what was actually going to happen. Once at their dorm, they would torment the poor kid for hours, but it was mostly stupid stuff, not any real physical harm. Nonetheless, many of the kids that came out of that school were seriously fucked up. Story 40. Back in 3rd grade 1997, a classmate of mine was acting out. I'm not sure if our teacher was in a bad mood or this was accepted behavior back in the day, but he made the troubled student come up the front of the classroom. He then grabbed this kid by neck, pinned him against the wall, and proceeded to lift him up off the ground as high as he could. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I do remember our teacher saying, "I could kill you if I wanted to, but not today." As he dropped him,